Welcome to Change the Climate, the program about the Olympia chapter of Citizens Climate Lobby and efforts to create the political will for a livable world. This episode features an interview with Sameer Ranade, manager of Front and Center, fighting white supremacy in all of its forms. He appeared on John Doherty's radio program Climate Talk on KTAH Radio Tacoma. By the way, John, who is a member of the Tacoma Citizens Climate Lobby chapter, was one of my first guests on Change the Climate.
Why don't you start off, Sameer, by giving us a rundown on who Front and Centered is and what the HEAL Act is, just the 30,000-foot view to start with here. Then I'd like to get to know you a little bit, too, after we've got that kind of reference.
Sure. So Front and Centered is a Washington state-based coalition of 60-plus organizations that are rooted in racial and economic justice. And on behalf of this coalition of organizations, we advocate for state-level climate policies. And these policies are embedded with the principles of racial justice. And one of our signature policies is the Healthy Environment for All Act, or HEAL Act for short. The HEAL Act basically is an effort to get the government, to direct the government to implement and enforce all of its environmental laws with a lens of justice. So it doesn't create any new programs or regulations. It's just taking the existing environmental laws on the books and ensuring that they are implemented with the explicit goal of reducing the disparities in environmental health quality across the state. It's for the environmental laws, all of the environmental laws that are on the books. There would be an assessment of how they're working and what major decisions that state agencies make as a result of those laws. And so the impacts of those decisions would be assessed to kind of mitigate any potential harm. It's assessing the social justice or implications of the environmental decisions that the state makes, and those implications, two broad categories. It's people of color are disproportionately impacted by pollution and climate change, so it would kind of assess the environmental impacts, and then also income is also a factor. So it would address just things that influence how somebody is impacted by the environment, and the HEAL Act would also empower a council. There would be a council established by the governor, and they would also recommend new policies that would have to get passed by the legislature, but to make environmental justice occur more effectively.
Okay, cool. So I'm getting a understanding here. So I would like to know a little bit about you, Sameer. How did you get into this work? What gets you up in the morning?
I think there's a lot of things that get me up, or keep me up at night rather. I think everything is really tied together. Climate change is the thing that has been driving me. I would say protecting the environment ever since I was a kid. I kind of just knew that there was a relationship between the environment and human health. But I also recognize that these things are really intersectional. And the thing that has been keeping me up at night really is the state of our democracy. And I used to work in the Senate. I used to work for Senator Patty Murray. My job was to lead tours of the U.S. Capitol. So it was really traumatizing to see those events. But the most specific thing that bothered me is that the democratic process, I think, is key to a better society. Not just for climate change, certainly for climate change, but all of the issues, and I look at them all connected. And so it's concerning that our democracy is on thin ice, and also just what's happening in Texas right now is, I'd say, I don't want to digress too much, but my motivation really is to, address climate change and social justice. Yeah, I mean, I think climate justice and environmental justice are kind of intertwined in many ways. Climate justice is when you address the disproportionate harm that climate change causes in a way that is the inverse of the burden. So and like the injustices that are happening right now, I guess you could say like the Tohola village. There's a tribe out there that is getting flooded. The impacts on farm workers from working in hot days outside, the heat waves, or flooded communities that and low income communities getting flooded. It's and so those are the injustices. But like you said, those communities are not have very little to do with the problem, but are bearing the brunt of it. So the climate justice would be a solution, a policy, a transformation of the economy that focuses on benefiting those communities that are the most impacted.
What's your assessment of how much traction environmental justice and climate justice issues are getting politically in the state of Washington?
I think they're getting a lot more assessment. I mean, I think there's really a huge amount of work that remains to be done. But I think, just the events of the past year have really heightened people's awareness of systemic racism, which affects to environmental issues and the impacts of COVID-19, the disproportionate impacts, I think have also raised some awareness that communities face environmental threats differently and deserve different levels of help. So I think in 2019 the bill did pass both chambers of the legislature. It didn't pass in whole, but I think we're probably a couple notches above that this time around. And we've got an overwhelming amount of support for the bill that was in the Ways and Means Committee. We had hundreds of people sign in support. So there's still a huge amount of work that absolutely has to be done to educate and engage the whole state. And part of that is just really it's making people aware. I mean, there are environmental injustices across the whole state, really. And so people, I think, need to also know what an environmental injustice is.
Yep.
It's also a rural community with, dirty water, for example.
Right. Let's just say you're advising me as a middle-class white guy who is concerned about the environment and the future of the climate, and I'm concerned that I'm not adequately connected with people of color, people from poor communities, people maybe have language barriers and so on, in terms of making sure we're doing the stuff that we should do.
I mean, I would also just kind of step back and say, like, you're right that it's underrepresented, the climate movement, but I wouldn't necessarily separate that from virtually every facet of society. It's people of color are generally underrepresented, so that kind of makes sense that it also would be for the climate movement, at least in the nonprofit advocacy world, and at least in the sense of like people who work in government, on environmental policy. It's probably underrepresented, or definitely is underrepresented there. So I think the good thing is, though, that the solution is because the problem is so broad, you can at least step in at really any angle and make an impact. It doesn't even necessarily have to be connected directly to an environmental issue. It's really just about empowering communities, volunteering at some organization. Like, off the top of my head, I mean, I guess, become a member of the NAACP is one thing. Maybe try to go to, I don't know if you go to church, try to go to a Black church or a church led by other POC groups, join AT&I's listserv, see what they're doing, consider donating or like going to dinners that different nonprofit groups do. I mean, there's still big NGOs that represent POC groups that you could get involved with or some degree. Go to events. It really will take, I'd say, going to the places where the community is and just being open to meeting and learning and listening to things that are going on, how you build those relationships.
Yeah, so there's no quick fix here. There's no snap. It requires effort, and I like to do a little self introspection, and you just hit me with your comments there, because when you first mentioned NAACP, which is an organization that I have huge respect for, but I realized in my mind that every time that organization's name comes up, there's something in my brain that says, well, that's for Black people. And so it never occurred to me, hey, just you could belong to the NAACP.
Oh yeah. No, anybody can be a member. And I think they also, I think they've had or do have white officers, if I'm not mistaken, a couple of their chapters. So yeah, in fact, I know that they do in the Yakima chapter. So yeah, I mean, it's you have to be committed to the mission, and that's.
So if I were to have 2 minutes to talk to somebody about the HEAL Act, what should I say to them?
I would say that right now there's a huge amount of disproportionate impacts due to the history of our country, that people are affected differently by race and income, and the climate, environmental disasters hurt different communities worse. And so the HEAL Act is an effort to focus the government on ensuring that the environmental laws that are passed, like the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act, which have explicit goals to provide clean air for everybody or clean water, drinking water for everybody, that the government actually focuses on meeting those goals. And it won't be able to if it doesn't incorporate the fact that if you were Black up until 1970, you were segregated. You had to live in a segregated neighborhood, and that happened to be closest to the freeway. And there's still the legacy of that today. So you're disproportionately exposed to air pollution, and therefore it's more important that the government focus on how it can reduce those pollutions, whether that's planting trees, providing community air filters, or just having more aggressive transportation policies and ensuring that those clean vehicles are also affordable. So the government, it's basically getting stuff. I'm probably going over 2 minutes here, but getting the government to do what it's already supposed to do better. It doesn't create any new laws or regulations, just takes what we already have. And by doing that, we benefit everybody. Because if you get rid of pollution everywhere, then you give pollution nowhere to hide. If you protect the infrastructure everywhere, ensure that it's upgraded and it's not poorly, it's not in poor conditions anywhere, then you prevent disasters from occurring that will create larger costs later. So the HEAL Act is truly about justice and effectiveness.
Yeah, just listening to your description there too, it's sort of like, well, who wouldn't want this stuff? I mean, and I 100% get the point that if all the water isn't clean, then we're not doing good enough. To have clean water in some communities, that's not good enough. So, from my perspective, looking at this as kind of like, well, duh, comes to mind. Where does the pushback come from? I mean, this is not the first year that the HEAL Act's been in the legislature. So where does the pushback come from? What's that about?
Yeah, it's the same groups that really opposed the Clean Water Act in the first place, or the Clean Air. It's really telling that it was the Association of Washington Business and the Washington Farm Bureau. But to the credit of AWB, Associated Washington Business, they stayed all the way through the environmental justice task force that was established, and I thought their guy was really engaged. They still oppose it, but it's due to the fact that regulations are going to be implemented more effectively. That permitting times there may need to be a deeper examination before permits are approved to assess their impacts. And that time, no business likes to spend more time on the red tape as it's seen, but that red tape is important to saving lives. Um, so yeah, that's broadly it. I mean, the HEAL Act is just going to make sure, and it'll crack down on violations. Better than it occurs now. It will direct enforcement agents to do a more holistic assessment of their work and where they track violators, and the most egregious violations should be the ones that get cut down more so with the implementation of the HEAL Act. So whoever's doing that violation, has an interest in not seeing this passed.
Yeah, I think that is just a really fundamental governmental responsibility to make sure that people who create costs, i.e., pollution, for example, are also the ones that are held accountable for that. Because it's real clear to me that if a business who is purely financially motivated can shift some costs, of silting a stream or creating fossil fuel pollution or other kinds of airborne pollutions, and they cannot bear the cost of that, they're going to do that. So it just seems to me this is really a fundamental role of government to make sure that our population, all of our population, is protected from those kind of activities. So,
yeah, and in environmental laws, I would just say environmental laws are broken all the time. So, that doesn't occur. Those costs aren't paid for.
Yeah, absolutely. And big picture, climate change wise, we're seeing that on a worldwide basis that folks who are creating the problem are not bearing the cost of that problem, and other people are bearing the cost of it. I mean, just off the top of my head, I've seen data that there's over 1,000 people a year that die prematurely just here in the state of Washington because of airborne pollution. So it's absolutely a thing, and it's a proper role for government, in my view.
Yeah, and of course, you could differentiate between. You're also talking, there's no law right now in our state that puts a price on pollution that makes those polluters pay the cost of the damage. So that would be outside the scope of the HEAL Act. But I think bringing it back into the HEAL Act, and this could be an outcome of the HEAL Act, is that the Environmental Justice Council established could recommend that the state really step up the enforcement and implementation of existing laws, because we actually may not really even need to pass a pollution price or a program, because the state already has, under the Clean Air Act, we already have the authority to regulate the greenhouse gas emissions of industrial facilities, but those laws are not, that law's not being implemented right now. So, I hope that the HEAL Act will also just scrutinize, force the government to scrutinize itself and implement those laws, which it could be doing.
Yeah, I share that hope with you for sure. So we're getting a little close to the end here. We got a few minutes left. So you made some reference to it, but go over for me where the HEAL Act is in the legislature right now. And then I'm going to ask you a follow-up question, for folks who are listening in who want to be a part of the solution here, to get some background of how they can do that. So just for starters, where are we in the legislature?
Yeah. So the HEAL Act had its first hearing a couple of weeks ago in the Senate Environment Energy and Technology Committee. It passed out of there. Then it went to the Senate Ways and Means Committee, where it had a hearing earlier this week. And today, as we speak, the bill is going to get a vote. It'll probably be voted on the next 2 hours in the Senate Ways and Means Committee. And so once it gets out of there, it will go to the Senate Rules Committee. And that's where they will decide whether to bring it to the Senate floor. And then, of course, if it passes out of the Senate, it'll have to go to the House and through the same process.
So have you gotten any indications of what Inslee's attitude is towards this bill?
Yeah, he supports it broadly. We're working with his staff on the bill is being amended, or it's been amended, and so we're working closely with the staff. He does support it, and in fact, in some of his climate proposal, he did take some elements of the HEAL Act and put them in that law.
Okay, cool. Well, I do think relative especially to what some other states have to deal with, I think we're pretty blessed to have a guy who's as environmentally aware as Governor Inslee is. I mean, I do hear people complaining about him, but I guess that's just part and parcel of being a politician. You can't you're not going to please everybody.
Yeah, right.
So folks that might want to express their opinion or support this process, this project, and I will have show notes, and I'll have reference to Front and Centered, and probably references to the bills. What should folks do that want to support this bill?
Well, there's a couple of things. So it's really going to be contacting your senator who represents you, especially now that it gets out of the Ways and Means Committee. We're no longer just targeting individual committee members; it's all senators. So you could go to Front and Centered's website, look up the HEAL Act, and you can get more information there. You can email me if you want to get on the list serve. I do bi-week meetings every other week. So my email is just sameer at frontandcenter.org. So email me if you want to get on the listserv, or just go to ledge.wa.gov and type in Senate Bill 5141 and submit a comment on why you support environmental justice. You can just submit your comment there. If you want background, I would recommend you go to the Front and Center blog and you look at a community report that I wrote on these listening sessions. That could give you a little more background on the HEAL Act and EJ, but really just talk about why you believe in justice and a just society.
Yeah, so I think one of the implications of what you're saying there is you don't have to be an expert. You don't have to make meaningful comments to the legislature. One of the examples I use sometimes is if I'm watching protesters or demonstrators somewhere, I pay a lot more attention to the handwritten cardboard signs than I do the kind of the slick ones that came from a print shop somewhere. And my belief is, right or wrong, that our elected officials are a bit the same way. They say, okay, this is a sincere person who really cares about this. They're not an expert. They don't have an axe to grind other than just trying to make the world a better place. So I think that the guidance you've given there is great.
Well, we really need to fight hard to get this through. And so, for all of you listening out there, thank you for your interest, and let's keep pushing. Let's get this passed. We've got to. It's been a long time coming.
Yep, for sure. And you've got my best wishes and support for that. So, as we finish up here, I happen to know that you are a poet as an avocation. So if you're up for it, could you finish it up here with reciting some poetry for us of your writing?
Yeah, sure. I was trying to think about what poem to do. I'll try this new one. It's like a minute and a half, maybe.
Go for it.
Okay. I'm trying hard to get the HEAL Act passed. Believe me, it will be key to ensuring no communities suffer from frack gas. Protect water and air with the tightest regulations. Follow the text of the Clean Air Act to withstand litigation. About everyone's welfare, our environmental agencies must care. COVID-19 has laid our flaws bare. To save the whole world, we need to create a better life for all. That may be intuitive, but we still waste money on building walls. For the last 4 years, we had progress stalled. We got to spark green growth fast, throw cash in emission reduction projects that enhance job prospects where unemployment rates are worse. Focus on slashing diesel that makes your lungs and heart hurt. Medical and fuel cost savings are an electric car's worth. For every source of energy, there are trade-offs. The best aim is to ensure jobs for those who are laid off. Air quality must improve. With the HEAL Act, the barriers to justice are removed. Push the Gov to enforce environmental laws fully. Achieving justice is hard, but don't give in to the bullies. Our people want action. An intersectional movement can unite divided factions. With community events, I help it gain traction. For climate and social justice, I have insane passion. Our goal to achieve a just green economy can succeed. The first step is to believe. From heat waves, communities deserve relief. We can reverse the negative effects on coral reefs, eliminate the carbon generated from eating beef. Not only does it mean eating less and raising cows with no stress, it's also capturing the methane instead of letting it make a mess. It's tragic that poop waste lagoons can affect our development in the womb.
That's awesome. And what the thing that occurs to me while I'm listening to you, we tend to, I guess I'll put it in terms of me. I tend to get kind of nuts and boltsy about all this stuff. What are the politics? What's the science? What's the psychology and stuff like that? And the thing is that really the passion that comes through in your recitation of your poetry there is in the final analysis, I believe, what it's all about. We're all human beings. And if we work hard, we can make this a better place. So I really appreciate the time you spent with us, Sameer. Thanks so much, and good wishes on your project, on your getting that bill through the legislature and signed by the governor.
If you would like to talk with Olympians about our chapter of CCL, or find any other chapters in any other town, go to citizensclimatelobby.org/chapters. Thank you for joining us on Change the Climate.